Let me show you something beautiful. A highway stretching through the Andes, a metro system connecting a sprawling capital, a hydroelectric dam powering millions of homes, a high-speed rail line linking major cities. Now let me show you reality. The highway ends abruptly at a mountainside, years behind schedule, billions over budget. The metro has 3 stations open after a decade of construction. The dam is half built, the contractor bankrupt, the riverbed dry. The high-speed rail exists only in architectural renderings and political speeches. This is Latin America's infrastructure curse. The region spends billions on projects that never finish. Billions more on projects that finish at 5 times the original cost. And when something actually gets built, it often doesn't work properly. Meanwhile, China builds entire subway systems in 3 years, Spain constructs high-speed rail across the country in a decade, Dubai rises from desert to metropolis in a generation. What's wrong with Latin America? Why can't the region build anything? The answer isn't about money. Latin America has spent hundreds of billions on infrastructure over the past 2 decades. The answer isn't about engineering. Latin American engineers are as capable as any. The answer is about a system designed to extract money rather than build things. A system where projects exist not to serve the public, but to enrich the powerful. A system so thoroughly corrupt that even well-intentioned efforts drown in its dysfunction. This is the story of that system, the cemetery of megaprojects, the billions wasted, and why it never seems to change. 1. The Odebrecht Blueprint. If you want to understand Latin American infrastructure, you need to understand one company, Odebrecht. The Brazilian construction giant was, for decades, the largest engineering firm in Latin America. They built stadiums, highways, dams, and metro systems across the continent. They were synonymous with major infrastructure. They were also running the largest corruption scheme in history. Operation Car Wash, the Brazilian investigation that began in 2014, revealed that Odebrecht had systematically bribed government officials across 12 countries for over 2 decades. The documented bribes exceeded $800 million. The actual figure was certainly higher. But the bribes were just the visible part. The real corruption was in the contracts themselves. Here's how it worked. Odebrecht would identify a major project, a highway, a dam, a metro line. They would cultivate relationships with politicians who controlled the contracting process. Campaign donations, personal payments, favors of all kinds. When the project went to bid, the fix was in. Odebrecht and allied companies would coordinate their offers. The winner was predetermined. The price was inflated to cover the kickbacks and guarantee healthy profits. Once construction began, the overruns started. Change orders, modifications, unforeseen complications, each one an opportunity to renegotiate the price upward. A project bid at $500 million would finish at $1.5 billion. The extra billion didn't go to better construction, it went to bribes, to company profits, and to a network of lawyers, accountants, and fixers who made the system run. Odebrecht perfected this model. They had an entire department called the Division of Structured Operations dedicated to managing bribes. They developed sophisticated systems for moving money, offshore accounts, shell companies, coded payments. When the company finally admitted its crimes in a plea deal with US authorities, it paid $2.6 billion in fines, the largest corporate penalty in history. But Odebrecht wasn't an anomaly. They were just the best at a game everyone was playing. 2. The corruption tax. Every infrastructure project in Latin America carries an invisible tax, the corruption tax. Studies have attempted to quantify this. The Inter-American Development Bank estimates that corruption adds 15–25% to infrastructure costs across the region. Other estimates run higher. But percentage estimates miss the full picture. Corruption doesn't just add cost, it changes what gets built. Selection bias. Projects are chosen not based on need or return on investment, but based on their potential for extraction. A complex highway through difficult terrain offers more opportunities for change orders than a simple road improvement. A new metro line creates more contracts than maintaining the existing one. The result: Latin America builds flashy new projects while existing infrastructure crumbles. There's no money in maintenance, only in construction. Design inflation. Projects are deliberately over-engineered to increase their price tag. A bridge that could be built simply becomes an architectural statement. A highway that could follow an easy route takes a more challenging path. Every additional complexity is an additional opportunity for cost overruns and renegotiations. Quality degradation. When the goal is extracting money rather than building well, quality suffers. Materials are downgraded, inspections are cursory, corners are cut where they won't be noticed until years later. Latin America is full of infrastructure that fails prematurely, roads that develop potholes within months, buildings that crack and settle, systems that never work properly. Time expansion. Quick completion isn't in anyone's interest except the public's. Every year of delay is another year of contracts, salaries, and opportunities for additional billing. Projects stretch indefinitely. The corruption tax isn't just money, it's a complete distortion of what gets built, how it's built, and how long it takes. 3. The financing trap. Latin American countries can't easily finance infrastructure. This creates opportunities for exploitation. Most countries in the region have limited fiscal space. They can't simply allocate large sums from general revenue. They need to borrow. International development banks, the World Bank, the IDB, CAF, will lend for infrastructure, but their processes are slow and demanding. Environmental reviews, procurement requirements, social safeguards, these add years to project timelines. Private financing is an alternative, but private investors demand returns and guarantees that stress public budgets. Chinese lending emerged as a tempting option, faster disbursement, fewer conditions, but Chinese loans often come tied to Chinese contractors, limiting competition and oversight. The result is a perpetual scramble for project financing that weakens the government's negotiating position. Construction companies understand this. They know the government needs them more than they need the government. They can demand contract terms that would be unacceptable in a competitive market. Minimum revenue guarantees. Many toll road concessions guarantee the operator a minimum income regardless of traffic. If fewer cars use the road than projected, which they usually are, the government pays the difference. The risk is socialized, the profit is private. Exchange rate protections. Foreign contractors often demand payment indexed to dollars or euros. When the local currency depreciates, project costs explode. Arbitration clauses. Contracts frequently require disputes to be settled in international arbitration, often in friendly jurisdictions where corporations have advantages. These terms mean that even when a project is completed, the public continues paying. The financing structure becomes another extraction mechanism. 4. The capacity problem. Here's a truth that corruption explanations sometimes obscure. Latin American governments often lack the basic capacity to manage complex projects. Building major infrastructure requires specialized skills, project management, contract design, technical oversight, quality assurance, cost control. These skills exist in Latin America, but not in sufficient quantity within government. The best engineers and managers go to private sector, where salaries are higher. Government technical agencies are understaffed and underfunded. The result is an asymmetry. Construction companies employ armies of lawyers, engineers, and contract specialists. Government agencies send a handful of overworked bureaucrats to negotiate. Who do you think wins these negotiations? When problems arise during construction, which they always do, government monitors often lack the technical expertise to evaluate claims. The contractor says unforeseen geological conditions require an additional $100 million. Is this true? The government inspector doesn't really know. Change orders accumulate, costs spiral, timelines extend, and the government lacks the capacity to push back effectively. Some countries have tried to build this capacity. Chile created independent technical agencies with real expertise. The results show Chilean infrastructure projects, while not immune to problems, generally perform better than regional averages. But building government capacity requires sustained investment and political commitment. It's not glamorous. It doesn't create ribbon-cutting opportunities, so it doesn't happen. 5. The political cycle. Latin American democracy creates perverse incentives for infrastructure. Presidents serve 4 to 6 years, sometimes with no immediate re-election. Their time horizon is short. They need to show results before the next campaign. This creates pressure for visible projects. Groundbreakings are political events. Ribbon cuttings are photo opportunities. What matters is starting projects, not finishing them. The result is a proliferation of initiated projects and a scarcity of completed ones. A new president inherits the previous administration's projects. These carry political credit for the predecessor, not the incumbent. The incentive is to slow them down, redirect funds to new projects, claim credit for new groundbreakings. Mexico's canceled airport is a perfect example. The previous administration spent billions on a new Mexico City airport. The new president canceled it, partly for legitimate concerns, partly because completing it would have credited his rival, billions wasted. Brazil's abandoned stadiums tell the same story. 12 stadiums built for the World Cup, several in cities with no major teams, now sit empty or underutilized. They were political projects designed for a moment, not infrastructure designed for decades. The political cycle also affects financing. Long-term infrastructure requires long-term commitment, but governments can't bind their successors. A project started in 2020 might lose funding in 2024 under a new administration. Private investors understand this. They demand guarantees that protect them from political discontinuity. These guarantees, paid by taxpayers, are another form of the infrastructure tax. 6. The cemetery of projects. Let me take you on a tour of failure. Argentina's Belgrano-Cargas Railway. This freight rail rehabilitation project started in 2006. Initial cost estimate, $1 billion. Actual spending, over $2 billion. Current status, largely incomplete. The project has survived 4 administrations, each promising completion, none delivering. Colombia's Ruta del Sol. This major highway project was supposed to connect the center of the country to the Caribbean coast. Odebrecht was the lead contractor. When the corruption scandal broke, the project collapsed. Today, sections remain unfinished. Total losses, billions. Peru's Interoceanic Highway, built to connect Peru to Brazil through the Amazon, cost overruns were massive. Traffic projections were wildly optimistic. The highway now carries a fraction of expected volume. Worse, it facilitated deforestation and illegal gold mining. A project that cost billions delivered negative value. Brazil's Transnordestina Railway. This freight line was supposed to transform the economy of Brazil's impoverished northeast. Started in 2006. Original deadline, 2010. Original budget, $2.5 billion. Current status, still incomplete. Current cost, over $8 billion. The projected completion date keeps moving. Venezuela's everything. Pick a project. The Venezuelan state has announced countless infrastructure initiatives over 2 decades. Bridges, metro lines, railways, housing, almost none have been completed. Billions of dollars have been spent with little to show except crumbling foundations and rusting equipment. These aren't isolated failures, they're the norm. The exceptional project is the one that finishes on time and on budget. Those exceptions prove the rule by their rarity. 7. The maintenance gap. Latin America has a particular problem. It builds things and then watches them fall apart. There's no political credit in maintenance, no ribbon to cut, no groundbreaking ceremony. Maintaining a road doesn't generate headlines. So, maintenance doesn't happen. The Inter-American Development Bank estimates that Latin America has a maintenance gap of hundreds of billions of dollars. Infrastructure that could last decades with proper care deteriorates within years. The economic logic is perverse but clear. A dollar spent on maintenance preserves existing assets. A dollar spent on new construction creates contracts, employment, and political credit. Politicians prefer the second dollar. This creates a cycle. Infrastructure deteriorates. Eventually, it fails completely. Now there's a crisis requiring emergency action. A new project is announced. Contracts are signed. The cycle repeats. The new project receives political attention and funding. Maintenance of the new project does not. In 15 years, we'll be rebuilding the same road. Brazil's highway system illustrates this perfectly. The country built an extensive road network over decades. Much of it is now in poor condition, with potholes, damaged surfaces, and unsafe bridges. The cost to repair the existing network would be a fraction of the cost to replace it. But repair doesn't generate the same opportunities for extraction and credit, so the roads continue deteriorating. 8. The China factor. Chinese infrastructure investment in Latin America was supposed to change things. Chinese state companies would bring efficiency. Chinese financing would bypass traditional obstacles. Chinese construction would deliver projects on time. The record is mixed at best. Chinese projects in Latin America have faced many of the same problems as domestic projects: delays, cost overruns, quality issues. Ecuador's Coca-Codo Sinclair Dam, built by Chinese company Sinohydro, was plagued by construction problems. Thousands of cracks were discovered after completion. The dam operates at reduced capacity. Bolivia's Che Guevara Highway, built with Chinese financing and contractors, faced significant cost overruns and quality concerns. Venezuela's numerous Chinese-funded projects are case studies in failure. though blame there is hard to apportion given Venezuela's general dysfunction. Chinese contractors face fewer constraints but not zero constraints. They still must navigate local politics, permitting, and labor relations. They still face geological and environmental surprises. And Chinese projects have their own problems. Quality standards are sometimes lower. Technology transfer is limited. The use of imported Chinese labor reduces local employment benefits. Chinese infrastructure isn't a solution to Latin America's problems. It's another player in the same dysfunctional system. 9. What would work? Is the situation hopeless? Not entirely. Some approaches show promise. Independent technical agencies. Chile's approach of creating professional bodies with real expertise and independence has improved outcomes. When government has technical capacity to negotiate and supervise, results improve. Transparency requirements. Countries that mandate public disclosure of contracts, budgets, and progress reports see somewhat better outcomes. Corruption thrives in darkness. Light helps, if only partially. International supervision. Projects financed by multilateral development banks, despite their slow processes, generally have better outcomes than purely domestic projects. External oversight adds accountability. Smaller projects. Mega projects are mega opportunities for corruption. Smaller, modular projects are easier to manage, faster to complete, and provide quicker feedback on performance. Private operation with public oversight. Some concession models, where private companies build and operate infrastructure under regulated terms, have worked reasonably well. The key is genuine regulation, not captured agencies. Anti-corruption enforcement. Operation Car Wash, despite its own problems, demonstrated that corruption can be investigated and punished. The fear of prosecution changes behavior. Sustained enforcement matters. None of these is a magic solution. All face implementation challenges in countries with weak institutions. But incremental improvement is possible. 10. The cost of failure. Let's be clear about what the infrastructure curse costs. Economic growth. Poor infrastructure is consistently identified as a major constraint on Latin American development. Goods are expensive to move. Supply chains are unreliable. Businesses locate elsewhere. The World Bank estimates that Latin America's infrastructure gap reduces GDP growth by 2 percentage points annually. Over a decade, that's enormous foregone prosperity. Competitiveness. Latin American exports are expensive because getting them to market is expensive. A container leaving Santos, Brazil's largest port, costs more to ship than a container leaving Shanghai, despite the shorter distance to US markets. This pricing disadvantage handicaps every exporter, from farmers to manufacturers. Inequality. Poor infrastructure hits the poor hardest. The wealthy can afford private alternatives. Private schools, private healthcare, cars instead of buses. The poor depend on public systems that don't work. When the bus doesn't come, when the road floods, when the power goes out, it's poor neighborhoods that suffer most. Opportunity cost. Every dollar spent on a project that doesn't finish is a dollar not spent on one that would. The billions locked in abandoned projects could have built schools, hospitals, or functioning infrastructure. The waste isn't just money, it's possibility. Trust. Each failed project erodes public faith in government. Citizens become cynical. They expect failure. They assume corruption. This cynicism makes reform harder, creating a vicious cycle. 11. The deeper problem. Ultimately, the infrastructure curse is a symptom of a deeper disease. Latin America has not solved the fundamental problem of governance, how to make the state work for the public rather than for those who control it. Infrastructure is just where this failure becomes most visible. The same dynamics that produce abandoned highways produce failing schools, corrupt police, and dysfunctional courts. The construction cartel that inflates project costs is cousin to the pharmaceutical cartel that inflates drug prices. The politician who takes kickbacks on a dam takes kickbacks on everything else. The weak oversight that allows cost overruns allows all manner of abuse. Fixing infrastructure means fixing governance. Fixing governance means changing power structures that benefit from dysfunction. This is hard. The people who profit from the current system have the power to protect it. The public interest is diffuse. The extraction interest is concentrated and organized. But it's not impossible. Some countries have made progress. Uruguay builds infrastructure more effectively than its neighbors. Chile's systems, while imperfect, work better than most. Change requires sustained pressure, from citizens, from media, from international institutions. It requires building coalitions for reform that can overcome resistance. It requires patience. because institutional change happens slowly. The infrastructure curse can be broken, but breaking it requires confronting why it exists in the first place. Conclusion: the roads not built. Latin America's cities are clogged with traffic because the metros weren't completed, its farmers struggle to export because the ports weren't expanded. Its factories are uncompetitive because the power isn't reliable. These failures aren't natural disasters, they're choices. Choices made by people who benefit from dysfunction. Choices to prioritize extraction over construction. Choices to treat public resources as private opportunities. Every unfinished highway has a story of corruption. Every abandoned project has beneficiaries who aren't the public. Every cost overrun has a contractor who profited. The billions wasted on failed infrastructure are billions not invested in human development. They're schools that weren't built, hospitals that weren't staffed, opportunities that weren't created. And the cycle continues. Right now, across Latin America, new projects are being announced. Politicians are breaking ground with golden shovels. Contracts are being signed with inflated prices. Bribes are being paid in cryptocurrency instead of cash. In 10 years, some of these projects will be complete and functioning. Many will be incomplete, abandoned, or obsolete. The cemetery of mega projects will have new headstones. It doesn't have to be this way. Other regions have built infrastructure efficiently. Latin America has the engineers, the capital, and the need. What it lacks is the political will to change a system that profits the powerful at the expense of everyone else. Until that changes, the cranes will keep rusting, the roads will keep ending in nowhere, and the billions will keep disappearing into the infrastructure curse. If this made you see those construction sites differently, hit that subscribe button, because understanding why things don't get built is the first step to demanding better. See you in the comments. And remember, every unfinished road is a story of choices made. The question is who made them and why.